And let's begin with our first question. Candidates, describe yourself with 30 seconds. Describe yourself in 3 to 5 words. Mr. Henry, let's start with you.
Thanks. 3 to 5 words I just describe myself. Caring, business owner, honest, integrity.
Mr. Hill.
Leadership, management, maintenance, and trust.
Ms. Smith.
Servant, sister, committed, integrity.
Mr. Cole.
Transparent, competent, humanitarian.
Judge McNair.
Native, experience, knowledgeable, moral, honest.
Ms. Cantrell.
Let's say results, listen, build consensus, encourage, action.
Mr. Bruce Lee.
Empathetic. Pause. I think my voice carries a little bit more. Empathetic, integrity, and truth.
Mr. Martin.
Passionate, eager, caring, thoughtful.
Mr. Dorrington.
Patriot, innovator, servant, hard worker, visionary.
We'll now go to the first question given to us by the coalition. We will begin with the front row, Mr. Dorrington, and go down the row. How will you support small businesses, particularly those owned and operated by people of color and women?
I will support small businesses, particularly with people of color and women, by adopting a model that was actually working. In Tremaine, which we know historically was the first and most prominent African-American community of thriving business, where money circulated within the community, where the taxes that was within that community were used to properly fund schools, infrastructure, and be used for investment. So we will adopt that model throughout that city. We're primarily seeking to help women, along with disadvantaged businesses, become stakeholders in the community. We will use the route of philanthropy to be effective. We see the research, and in research and the final analysis, philanthropy is the best route to take. It's the least cost, most effective, and most beneficial.
Thank you. Mr. Martin.
Well, while there's a disparity of small businesses, particularly with African American women, I would approach it just like I approach any other small business. You know, it's our job as economic developers, which what I do, is to look to keep businesses healthy, happy, and here. And I think it starts with education. There's a tremendous amount of resources out there for small businesses that they particularly won't or don't know about. You know, for example, exposing them to WIA, or now it's commonly called WOIA, Workforce Opportunities Investment Act. It's tens of millions of dollars that comes back to the community. It's taxpayer dollars collected by the federal government, and it comes back to the city by way of this act. It goes unused or improperly used, and we all know that the money comes through the federal government. If you don't use it, they'll take it away. It's difficult to get it back. So one, it's education, teaching them what's available out there. Secondly, I would certainly welcome foreign direct investment. There are literally billions of dollars flowing in from UAE, from Asia to the U.S., and it's going untapped here in this region. How do I know about it? Because we maximized it in Detroit, we maximized it in Phoenix, Arizona, Scottsdale, Arizona. So those are the things we do in education, let them know what's available to maximize foreign direct investment, because again, small businesses need capital to sustain themselves.
Thank you. Mr. Brewski.
Yes, thank you. One of the partners that I've learned to work with since I started this endeavor was the Noble Business Alliance. And they have given me some really insight into how the system works as a newcomer to this. I would be willing to work with them, listen with them to their ideas, also incentives, tax incentives, and simplify the business process because a lot of it is paperwork, trying to get things started. So if you simplify, incentivize, and work with partners, we can get this done. Thank you.
Mrs. Cantrell.
Well, I will continue to do what I have been doing, and that is leveraging resources both at the private level and public level. We have to, provide our small businesses with not only education, but the access to capital so that they can scale up. When you talk to small businesses throughout the city, it's that access to that capital that's really preventing them from reaching their full potential, and not just as a business, but offering jobs and access to our community and employing those who are some of the hardest to employ. I would also ensure that the disparity study that the council has put forth in terms of funding, that actually is completed and is used to link our city with greater federal dollars that could help, again, alleviate the disparities that we have within the city of New Orleans. I would scale up and support the New Orleans Business Alliance, but also build in accountability measures to ensure that the resources that we are using are truly hitting the ground and helping our small businesses, as well as focus on stabilizing the environment in which our businesses are located. I think that also helps. You just think about South Broad and Broad in Washington. We can get the trash out of people's eyes and make it easier to access the businesses. It truly does spur development.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the next question. We will begin with Judge Bagneris. Do you want to ask the same question?
It was designed to do a different question per level. If you all are comfortable with that, we'd like to do that. If you think it's best to answer the same question, we're very open to that, to what works. Are you all prepared to answer the same question? Well, why don't we
Let's
jump
go
into
with
that?
Judge Bagneris, let's start with you. Same question, please.
Well, first of all, the main thing that the city deals with in terms of businesses, it deals with directly is contracts. I would make sure that in the DBE category, it was always monitored, and that I would encourage to have in-state contractors as opposed to out-of-state contractors doing work. I would also encourage the DBEs to bid on the prime contract, and I would obviously help them to leverage the necessary finances necessary, bond necessary, to be able to bid on the prime contract. I would also deal with training. I'd like to be the first mayor to have an office of family service and education inside City Hall. Neither the traditional schools nor the charter schools are really dealing with things like VOTEC training. Those bring about a very, very comfortable income, and it's a situation where it is highly in need in this particular city. I would also, not only VOTEC training, biotech training as well. I would also encourage an environment that would bring about small businesses, such as revitalizing Lincoln Beach, so that once that beach is revitalized, you're going to see restaurants there, you're going to see retail businesses there, you'll probably even see a nice little boutique hotel. Those are just some of the things I'd like to do.
Thank you. Mr. Cole?
Just for clarification, could you repeat the question?
The question, how will you support small businesses, particularly those owned and operated by people of color and women?
Okay, so since there's an emphasis on people of color and women, first what we must do is discuss the pink elephant in the room. I remember Sanders Grocery Store on Durgeon Wall, and I remember after Katrina he tried to come back and they wouldn't renew his lease. We have a conundrum here. We're considered the minority, but we're the majority. So what I would do for the small business, first and foremost, is I would correct what the bureaucracy has messed up. If you look at the records from our Supplier Diversity Office, our standard is 35% of every municipal dollar must go to a minority business. But if you count what's included in the pool of minorities, being all women and LGBT now within the last 4 or 5 years, and then 58% of the black people in New Orleans. So we have roughly 70 to 75% of our people vying for 35% of the municipal dollar. And so when we look at the demographics and look at our city and see who owns all the businesses, and most of them small businesses are not African American, then we see that we need to raise those standards to be reflective of the population, or either admit that we are the majority here and quit allowing them to use those systems that subjugate us and have us scratching our heads. So what I would do is, for starters, I would discuss that there's an issue involving women and small businesses in New Orleans being blocked out. I know of the Rouge House they tried to establish in the French Quarter. A black female business owner was blocked out by the most prominent businessmen in New Orleans. They all signed for no reason, just that they didn't want her there. So we have to address these things. They're not going to go away. The mentality is not going to go away. But we deal with
Mr. Cole, that's time.
diversity.
That's time. Thank you. Ms. Smith?
In reference to women in business and women of color, and how we use the workforce to move forward with increasing that and recognizing that, I believe we need to be honest with each other. I don't find that we are. Women have always been very active in promoting businesses, but we tend to want to keep women in the background. We only want women to be involved with church or some sort of nonprofit. But women are very important. Women of color are very important because majority of the world population is women of color. So we have to respect that. The way I would increase businesses is to respect the women that have revenue coming into the city. I would also discuss better contract with women without them necessarily being DBE certified. I just think if you want to do business, let's just do business without having all this bureaucracy. And then I want to visit the women who are in business. I want to find out what their interests are and what we can do to improve on those businesses and add to those businesses. I want to see more networking with women, women of color as well as women who just want to network. I believe you are a powerful source to this city. I believe you get things done quickly, and I believe that you listen. And hopefully we can have more women step up and make things happen in this city. But I would definitely use the money that is in economic development. I would reevaluate it, and then I would see where the money needs to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hill.
First off, I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I've opened several companies here in Orleans Parish, and I can tell you one thing. It's not pleasant to do business with Orleans Parish City Hall, for many reasons. And what we do, has everybody been to the one stop in City Hall? The one place where everybody goes and they stop? You know that your day is shot because you've got to wait for somebody, and you have to wait for somebody else, and they need more paperwork. Okay? I think the system is designed wrong. I think that the one stop needs to be more of a resource center where you can go and get answers. You can get answers, but you don't have instructors. Because when it comes to entrepreneurialism, you don't necessarily have a mentor. You don't necessarily know what to do. And you need some insight. And we do not provide that as a city. But moving forward from that, let's say, yeah, you got a business, but then it gets tougher because it costs so much to just deal with the fines and the fees and dealing with the paperwork. It costs $240 just to open the lowest level business here in Orleans Parish. And then another $250 to open any commercial account to go with it. We need to bring that down. We need to bring that down to around $26 so that people can take a shot at their dream. And if they fail, they can take a shot again. and another shot, and another shot. Because if you don't have mentorship, sometimes you have to learn through your mistakes. But that's what business is about. And it doesn't matter whether you're male, female, black, white, I'm Latino, it doesn't matter. All business deals with the same problems. Cash flow, the city, and you yourself as the entrepreneur, what you know and what you don't know. Sky's the limit? No. You're your limit. And every business owner knows that. Thank you.
Right on time, Mr. Hill. Thank you so much for your comments. Mr. Henry.
Well, I am a small business owner, but I own one of the largest African-American owned businesses in the state of Louisiana. So I've had the benefit of being a super small business to now being a bigger small business, let's just call it. There are a number of things that I've done in the past that I think will be of help as mayor of the city. First, I ran probably the most successful support services program in the state of Louisiana for the Department of Transportation. We were able to help businesses, small, minority, DBE businesses, get over $150 million worth of work, which was significant. And that was statewide, not just New Orleans. First thing I would do is I'd implement a program very comparable to what we did at DOTD. It worked, it was effective, people made money, there was no scandals or issues with it. Today is a sham in City Hall when you talk about DBE programs. I bet you can't tell me one person, one African-American business today that's done well under this man. True African-American, not one of the ruse companies, but an actual business. I think about my friend Arnold Baker, and Baker Ready Mix is no longer in business, and they were pouring concrete all over the city. But they've been shut out of every single project since this mayor has taken office. So I do that. So we've run a successful DBE program on. Second of all, I'd help and encourage these DBE programs to also bid as primes. I'd break up the larger projects so that they could be done in smaller sizes so that the bonding capacity of small businesses could be handled there. The other two things that I would do is one, I'd be a corporate liaison. What does that mean? It means that not only do we want minority and DBE businesses to do business with the government, we also want them to do business with the private sector. So whether that's doing it with our Fortune 500 companies or doing it with other larger companies that exist today, we need a liaison to help shepherd these small businesses into the commercial world as opposed to relying only on the public sector. Thank you.
Time. Thank you. Next question, Judge McNair, we will begin with you. How will you ensure that commercial corridor revitalization projects foster equitable economic development and do not push marginalized groups out of their traditional neighborhoods?
That's a mouthful.
Repeat.
Please.
How will you ensure that commercial corridor revitalization, excuse me, how will you ensure that commercial corridor revitalization projects foster equitable economic development and do not push marginalized groups out of their traditional neighborhoods?
Go, Mike. You go first. Well, I think that the beginning step is to have a plan. You have to look at what you're going to be bringing into that commercial development district. Once you have a plan and you know what you're about to bring in, then you are able to obviously advertise to the community so that the community, both black, white, Latino, is able to determine where they would be able to fit in those businesses that is designed within that corridor, and go through that process of expanding that in the corridor. Now, in terms of how do you bring businesses in and not displace the people that's in the neighborhood? I believe you have to, as part of your plan, communicate with the neighborhood in terms of where would be, in their view, the neighborhood view, the best areas for the placement of the businesses.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cole?
I believe that the first thing that we would have to address is the fact that those blocks of people need true representation from their elected officials so that their concerns are not just, blown over. But I think that we need to be innovative in New Orleans, period, in terms of coming up with some type of solutions for residency requirements. We just sold like 3 blocks of Treme on Mason Street to who? And who's gonna live there? And none of that was questioned. So obviously we need checks and balances for all systems, but we have a serious problem in New Orleans with gentrification. And we could start by putting a mandate on people who want to come here and purchase property, whether it be commercial property or residential property, and make them have to go through some standards which require them to think twice about trying to come here and exploit the indigenous people. The root of this problem is racism and the fact that our city is being ran by 501c3 and corporate entities that both have discretional power wielded by white people who are not from New Orleans. And until we address that again, we're back to a demand for full equity. Like how you cannot go in any institution in the United States and say anything derogatory about anyone gay because it has been made a standard that does not happen. We have to push for that in this election cycle for black people because 1 million jobs can come and we won't get them. They tell us 56% unemployment for black males, but I meet a new Caucasian in the French quarters every weekend from Iowa, Ohio, Alaska, California. And they're working at all the places where they're telling us that there are no jobs. You don't need any training to work at the Hollywood Cafe.
Mr. Cole, that's time. Ms. Smith?
This is a tough question, and you have to be honest with yourself if you're going to really ask these type of questions, because if you just take a look at what happened to Magazine Street, it first started off with gentrification, and then the businesses came based upon the neighborhood and the people that dwell in the neighborhood. And then you look at Treme. Why would you take an ancient black neighborhood as Treme, make it a popular white neighborhood, and then use black culture to make others think that you are revitalizing these neighborhoods and bringing in commercial businesses? You have to be honest about what you want from New Orleans. Do you want New Orleans? That's all we want to know. Because if you want to come and build in New Orleans and help the people of New Orleans, then we should see more black businesses. We should see schools that are revitalized based upon the culture, the children that goes there. But we are beginning to see a wipeout of our culture. And we are beginning to see people that come in with their businesses, and if the neighborhood doesn't meet to their businesses, somehow along the way, these families get moved out. So to come and bring this question to us and ask us about revitalizing commercial, and then turn around and look at neighborhoods that have been totally wiped out, and these businesses have absolutely nothing to do with New Orleans. The question is, do you really want to develop these neighborhoods with black families already in them? Get businesses that complement black families, and we all grow together. But I don't see that. And until we really recognize the commercial infrastructure without moving the families out first and then...
Ms. Smith, that's time. Mr. Hill?
As far as development districts are concerned, we have too many of them, and we're doing them too fast. Just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. And we've created a false gold rush for our land and our property by creating all these development districts. Okay, that comes from our leadership. And we all know the reason why people are being gentrified is speculation. We know that these houses in these areas are not worth what what people are paying for. They're paying for it, and then they're going to have to pay for the mortgages, they have to pay for the rents, and everything else on top of it. It's a snowball that's compounding. To deal with that, we can do two things. We have to bring down the cost of living, which means bringing down property taxes, bringing down fees. And we also need to be smart about how we apply our growth. Look, over here on this side of the industrial canal, we're having all these problems. But if we go to the other side of the industrial canal, it's not quite the same, because we haven't created that gold rush. But what I want to do over there is I want to use mixed-use zoning, something we really don't use here. It's called urban centers. They use them out in the suburbs. And it's a high-rise. They build up instead of out. And what you have, it's all-inclusive. So you're going to have a grocery store. You're going to have entertainment. You'll have restaurants. You'll have dentists. You'll have all this in a 1 mile square zone area. And that way, with building up, we can cap the amount of people that we're bringing in here and also control the rents on these things. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to choose how we deal with our business. And we haven't been choosing very smartly as of recently. Thank you.
Mr. Henry.
My short answer to the long question is I would do an impact assessment, first of all, on any of these commercial corridors. And the impact assessment, with the results of the impact assessment, I would get community input, community feedback on the revitalization project. So that's my answer now. I want to talk specifically, since I got a lot of extra time, about New Orleans East, because I think it's been the most neglected portion of our city with the most potential. So you'll hear me say, I want to redevelop the Lake Forest Plaza Mall and make it into a regional center. Put stores in it that are regionally focused, like IKEA, like there's none in the state of Louisiana. So you bring Mississippi money in, North Shore money to New Orleans, instead of being the opposite of that. I want to also redevelop Jazzland theme park, make it into a family-friendly fun. Lincoln Beach, I want to redevelop Lincoln Beach. And then in addition to that, I want to have Xavier and Dillon come together to form the 4th African American Medical School. You start, and run it at the New Orleans East Hospital. You start looking at how New Orleans East can now be a jewel of the city of New Orleans, as opposed to what has been essentially a neglected part of the community that I live in. And so that's kind of, the other thing is we're migrating jobs to New Orleans, and a lot of those jobs that we're going to migrate, 40,000 jobs to New Orleans, will end up in New Orleans East, because it's where the land mass is. So the simple answer to the revitalization is we're going to do an impact assessment on any revitalization, and we'll get community feedback based upon that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dorrington?
Yes, thank you very much. So how can we ensure that the commercial corridor is balanced and equal and does not exclude marginal groups of the neighborhood? First, we could begin with aligning commercial entities with community entities, being aligned with ideology and perspective. If we can take into consideration the elements of transparency, checks and balances, with non-biased personnel based on race, gender, class, and age. And we can look at it at these commercial entities as being manufacturers. These commercial entities are being manufacturers, and we include 50% local participation. They will create jobs, stimulate the economy, and it won't shut down the mom and pop shops. If the mom and pop shops can go to these manufacturers, buy their goods, contribute to supply and demand, they can grow along with the commercial entities. We take into consideration a win-win opportunity initially with commercial, residential, neighborhood, and community growth. There will be opportunity for commercial, there will be opportunity for the small business, and both will succeed. But we have to look at the research. We have to look at the demographics. We have to look at the neighborhoods. We have to see what is most necessary, what's the highest priority, and what will be the most beneficial. Thank you.
Mr. Martin?
So I was recruited in 2012 through a national search to help lead economic development of New Orleans. The answer to that question has already been answered with our 5-year strategic plan. In 2012, for more than 12 months, we pulled together, I say we, New Orleans Business Alliance, the mayor's office, we pulled together over 150 small businesses throughout Orleans Parish. And we worked diligently to put together this 5-year strategic plan that's supposed to lead us into 2018, next year. I still have it. I have it on my shelf. And I believe that's where it's at in everybody else's office, on its shelf. We were aggressive with it. We had a plan to talk about where we are as a community, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. It was a strategic plan, and we pulled every business that we could in on it. Spent a lot of money on it. I would dust it off, take a look at it. And now the time has changed. Instead of reproducing something new or producing something new, I will look at what we already have. The problem is, we got away from a vision. We have to stick with it. So again, we've already done it through the 5-year strategic plan. I don't know if any of you have heard about it, but if you go to New Orleans Business Lines, nolaba.org, I believe it's still there. And they talked about the types of businesses that was coming. They talked about how to keep the local businesses, the small businesses, healthy, happy, and here. And it was a great plan, some of the greatest minds in this city. We just have to stick with it, go back to it, and once we stick with it, stay with it, and not veer away from it. Over on the West Bank, I'm actually championing up economic development for the Algiers Economic Development Foundation. We took that same model and applied it to that 17 square mile. We pulled businesses together and we talked to them. And it's education. Some businesses, they are going to grasp it and stick with it and grow. The others are not. You have the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program, which is a phenomenal program. You're talking world-class education for free. We can get businesses to sign up.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Mr. Brewski.
Okay, there we go. I go with the judges. This is a tough question, and it is because everyone wants to see every business make. That's the whole idea. Like Matt was saying, everybody wants it to happen. What we need to do, though, is we need to look at the different areas where we're going to be putting businesses and what kind of business we're going to bring in here. Right now, the city needs to look inward before we look outward. We need to fix ourselves before we can fix and start looking out. Right now, our roads, our power grid, our sewers and water board, we need to work on ourselves before we can start telling businesses, hey, we're ready for business, come on in. There's roads that you can't even drive on. We need to look at ourselves first before we start looking outward. And working with the city council, the citizens need to tell the council what they want to bring it to the mayor's office. We need to work together, all of us, the city council, the mayor's office, and all these different business alliances and everything. We need to look into ourselves first and see where we want to go as a city. And we need to fix our house first.
Thank you. Tommy Vassell, welcome to the forum. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Camille. First of all, I want to apologize for being late. I didn't get the memo that we were starting at 4, but I did pick up my 2 little ones and brought them home before I came here. Secondly, I want to thank you all for inviting me. I don't always get invited to forums, so I do want to appreciate the group here for inviting me out. Thirdly, I understand that they asked the first question about 5 things, so I want to try to do all of that. My 5 things that describe me as honest, intelligent, caring, servant, and leader. To this question, I live in Trevor, so when we talk about development and we talk about literally kicking people out, I want you to know that it's not a black and white thing that causes that to happen. Because I've seen blacks come into my neighborhood and kick blacks out. So I've seen whites come in and do the same thing. So it's not a race issue. What it really boils down to, what we're talking about here is about money. I'm a CPA with 36 years of experience, and I can tell you people come to the office about putting deals together for them, asking me whether or not I can find people that are willing to invest in deals. Well, oftentimes I can't find African Americans with the money to invest into those deals. So that when we talk about development in our neighborhoods, oftentimes it goes to those who have the dollars to do those type of investments. Now in my neighborhood, look, we tried to hang on, myself and a few African American homeowners, hang on to the property. Because in my neighborhood, businesses are going up. You heard Byron talk about on Basic Street. Well, that was a developer that put that up, as well as a hotel on Rampart Street across from St. Jude Church. I mean, but that person had the resources to do that. I actually tried to buy a piece of one of those properties on Basic Street because I grew up in that neighborhood, and it was a Treme grocery store. Well, I called that person, and we talked, but he never got down to me.
Mr. Vassal, we have to call time. Ms. Cantrell.
Yes. I do agree that on the front end it does deal with assessment. You have to determine within the corridor that you're looking at whether or not it is a weak market or a strong market, which then dictates the type of incentive strategy or development strategy that we need to move forward on. Tying incentives to that strategy is absolutely critical, again, to help create balance and stabilize the businesses that you're trying to impact within the corridor. Much like Washington Broad, this area here, the community worked together, identified over $15 million, and went to the city and said, can you leverage $1 million for the $15 million? Well, you know what? It was a big struggle. At the end of the day, the city came forward with $1 million, but the whole deal was about to fall apart. So city government should not make it hard to leverage resources and to come up with incentives to make this happen. In addition, I would lobby to change state law that will allow New Orleans more flexibility with our property taxes so that we can be flexible with creating incentives. A good thing, and Mr. Cole mentioned in terms of residential as well as commercial properties, with incentivizing your landowners. Some of the businesses may not own the property, but they're leasing. So being able to help that landowner stabilize the rent so that that tenant can actually stay in. This is going on Ferret Street right now. Beauty Lab had to close down because the rent went up. And so if we can incentivize that landlord to keep it stabilized, that will allow mixed-use businesses to exist and also thrive. It has to be a priority. I would also stabilize the areas around the commercial corridor. Again, getting into the neighborhoods, cleaning it up, greening it up, which will attract people to then patronize the businesses that we're trying to improve. Partnerships are key.
Time, Ms. Cantrell. Thank you. We will now go to a question that we got from the audience. Mr. Henry, we will begin with you. What is the largest organization, employees, and budget that you have ever directly managed?
Budget is about 2.2 billion. Organization size, I think, would be about 50, that I directly manage and directly control. I think it's about 1,500. I think it's about, in my own business, I think it's about 200. And our maximum budget, I think, is about 60 million. So my professional experience goes extensive beyond a couple $1 billion and a few thousand people, but my personal business experience is, I think, a little over north of 60 million. Thanks.
A little over 7 million and 34 employees.
Well, without me using someone's name, one called That's All, I used to be his referral paralegal. So if you ever did business with him, I'm the one that referred your case, got your case taken care of. I'm also the one that spoke to other attorneys about your case. Usually, I handle anywhere from $1 to $2.3 million with one call. That's all. Thank you.
I worked at Idaho Telemarketing and Management. I was quality assurance at any given time for both shifts, maybe 500 people. And I didn't deal with the money in that particular instance. But I also run a grassroots organization called Fathers Advocacy, where we have about maybe 7,000 members nationally. And obviously we're grassroots, so we deal with a smaller budget. But I think that's significant because what we do with the little $20,000, $30,000 we get a year from our supporters is far more than the progress we saw from anything NOLA for Life did last year, period.
As a part in relatively small business, about 12 people and about $3 million. And as a chief judge, that would only be about 110, 115 people. And quite candidly, the millions fluctuated. But anyway, I would say anywhere between 11 and 13 million.
Ms. Cantrell?
When I'm looking over my experience in regards to organizations that I've managed and really started, it is an average of over about 150 million, but when you break it down, the charter school started with over 100 employees, of course 700 children, community development corporation that leveraged over 50 million to rebuild homes, and of course staff of about 5, but internship program that extended up to 60, a health clinic, arts and wellness center, and the Greater New Orleans Education Foundation that I managed as well. That's all tied to that overall number I gave.
I was formerly on the school board when we had 132 students. Our budget then was over $500 million. Currently, I oversee the jails budget, which is about $90 million. I was the internal auditor for Mobile, which was, at that time was the second largest oil company. It was a multi-billion-dollar organization. Personally, my business is ranged in $1 million, range that I personally oversee my own direct funds. I'm also the immediate past chair for the Catholic Charities, and we have over a $40 million budget there. So as a CFO, I've managed quite a bit of money over my 36-year career.
The answer I'm going to give you guys is going to be like, what? Right now, I'm a registered nurse. I've currently overseen 104 to 105 patients a night as a supervisor. I've managed 25 nurses and CNAs during the shift. I'm currently working on a chemotherapy unit, and I manage up to 4 patients a night, making sure medications, chemotherapy are administered properly and promptly. I believe that translates well because it teaches me critical thinking skills, and I know how to work with people. If I need something, I know where to get it. If I don't know where to get it, I ask. And that is an important thing about being mayor. If you're not sure of something, you ask. You just don't do it. Thank you.
Mr. Martin?
As a manufacturing engineer and manager for the nation's largest automobile manufacturer, General Motors, I was privileged to manage more than 200 individuals, union workers, with a budget of about $250 million. Prior to my leaving General Motors, I was part of a team that opened up Lansing Delta Township, which was a $3 billion project. Of course, many hands were on deck to deal with that project. $3 billion, we ended up producing the GMC Acadia as well as the Buick Enclave. So directly, about 200 individuals. Budget-wise, about $250 million.
When we historically look at the academy, the institution that Socrates, Plato, and Motel used as a laboratory to dissect ideas and impact the future. Me being an educator, just being in the classroom, I would have to say the form of currency that is accumulated in my particular profession may not be monetary, but it's time, it's input, output, effort, humanitarianism. Every organization in this country, whether it's the CEO, the president, or board members that operated it, they came from the academy, they came from the classroom, they came from the laboratory of ideas. It's unnumberable due to the continuous production of future leaders that I graduated from grade school, high school, college, going on to professional arena. So when we look at different forms of currency, I have balanced billions of dollars. Ideas is where millionaires got their start. So organizations came from that. It's continuously growing as we speak.
Excuse me. Yours is priceless. Yours is priceless. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on now to the second topic that the coalition came up with, and that is economic inequality and wealth disparities. Ms. Cantrell, we will begin with you. How will you reverse the racial wealth gap, inequity, and overall economic inequality in this city?
Thank you. Kind of mentioned things that really tie to economic equity as well as dealing with the wealth gap. We know that we definitely have disparity that exists in the city of New Orleans, and that's why that disparity study is so important. That we need to ensure that not only it's completed, but that we fully implement it so that we can get additional resources at the federal level to help us stabilize and provide access into capital that can help build our businesses. Small businesses are very important and are vital to the welfare and growth of this city. In addition to that is really workforce development and training opportunities to ensure that our people have not only the knowledge base and skill sets, but so that they can take advantage of the opportunities that are present. We know that there are industries that are here and will thrive here, but we need to develop the workforce. So whether that is digital media platforms, advanced manufacturing, stormwater management, renewable energy, it really goes on and on. We know that those businesses are coming as well as are about to thrive here. But what I'm told is that we are not investing in training and workforce development at the level that we need to connect our people to those jobs. And nothing stops a bullet like a job. And it really comes down to how are we going to survive? How are we incentivizing growth to happen in the city of New Orleans? And so it really goes back to how are we connecting people to training, workforce development, and education. Mr. Russell.
Yes, first of all, I want to thank the members of the collaborative that I see here because that disparity study came out of that group looking at the business that was not taking place amongst that group. And I attended several of those meetings just trying to understand why qualified business people, certainly African Americans, were not getting to work in the city. And that continues to be a problem unless you have a mayor who's going to make sure that that happens. It will continue. But I want to talk about what really has happened over perhaps the last 10 plus years. And it deals with what all of us sitting up here are seeking to do. And that's to become mayor or those people that you've seen. We in the African American community tend to be so divisive when one party gets in that we decide that the other party that was not supporting us does not get any work. So one of the things I'm going to pledge that I am not going to be exclusive of any business. There are a lot of people running in this race. Not everybody supporting me, but that shouldn't matter. And I'm not going to be that type of mayor who says that just because you signed up with somebody else, you can't eat for the next 8 years. Because we've had too much of that. I want to be an inclusive mayor. I want to be inclusive. It's too easy because we've not progressed the way we should have by being so divisive. So I want to pledge to you all here tonight that I'm going to be the mayor that's going to not look at who supported any of my opponents and decide that they're not going to participate. There's a way that we can work together. We have to continue to collaborate. We have a lot of small businesses out here that oftentimes cannot do it alone. We have to come together, sometimes and form joint ventures ourselves so that we can get more of the pie. We also have to look at
Mr. Brewski.
Well, this inclusive part of this is also, like you said, key. But we also need to be able to enable people to become small business owners. Right now, we have no trade schools. I know the judge talked about that a little bit earlier. But I've been preaching about trade schools since I first declared in March. We need to educate people to fit into the workforce. We have to get people trained. Has anyone tried to be a plumber or electrician lately? Yeah, it's not easy, is it? Right now, there's an ad on Facebook for a plumber for the convention center. Why do we have an ad for a plumber on Facebook for the convention center? You mean you're telling me there's no plumbers in the city? We need to train people. Once these people that are graduating from school, they'll be able to get an apprenticeship, start working as an electrician, a plumber, a welder. My God, in this state, a welder, an underwater welder, you know how much they make? 6 figures. You can start by training the youth of today so they can have a job. Once they have a job, they can become the small business owners. We need to work together. We've got to get together because otherwise we're just going to tear ourselves apart. Thank you.
Mr. Martin.
Economic inequalities, wealth, let's just call it what it is. That's just a creative way of saying dealing with the poor folk. That's a serious issue across America, not just here in New Orleans. But I think you look at best practices. Bruce, you're right on point. Not every child is going to go to college. We push it so hard, we push it so hard. But I have 22 years of experience in economic and workforce development under my belt. 22 cities that I've worked with. We've created programs, just as he talked about, apprenticeship programs for HVAC, heating and cooling, electrician, automotive. But this opened up doors for these young kids who are not deciding to go to college. We increased these livable wages at $17, $18, $19 an hour. We have to do more of it here. We had one of my candidates talk about Job One. It's the one stop. He's absolutely right. You go there, and that's just where you stop. There's tens of millions of dollars flowing through Job One that's set up to do just what we're talking about right now, giving these kids an opportunity for training. Not only just the kids that's coming out of high school, but even, you look at GE. We brought GE here more than 100 jobs, close to 200 jobs, at about $100,000 each. We couldn't fill the jobs. And so we have to be able to train our workforce. Secondly, we will be welcoming to businesses. Troy Henry mentioned Fortune 500 companies. We don't have enough here. They will come in if we go recruit them. It's not that we can't, it's how do we. Again, I've done it before. Intel, Boeing, Honeywell, Amazon, fulfillment centers. It's not hard, but you have to get up and you have to go there and you have to support them, bring them here, but you certainly have to be able to have the workforce.
To reverse the race gap and inequality, we would have to transfer from primitive ideology to intellectual perspective and adopt global concepts. In the 1600s, the ideology of race was invented. However, scientifically, we are all in the human family. We have to look at that, and we have to come to the table with that conversation first. We also have to allow the United States Constitution to manifest into the physical realm with American citizens, naturalized immigrants, tax-paying workers, and community stakeholders as all having an equal shot and opportunity. The first example that I would use to reduce that gap is reduce the mayoral staff. Right now, the mayor's staff consists of spending $21.6 million on deputy mayors. We can take that money and hire 226 people, and they can make $34 an hour. New Orleans has more colleges per capita than any other city in the country. Students that graduate from Tulane, Baylor, Xavier, UNO, can't find jobs here in New Orleans. So if we can redirect our budget in a way that can be contributed to youth development and professional growth, we can begin starting right there. Thank you.
Judge Bergnas.
First, we have to recognize that the wealth gap exists because we are over 300 years behind. We came here and changed, so it's kind of difficult to start from an even pace. Now, that being the case, we should not use that as an excuse because you got to start somewhere to build your wealth. And that's why I say we have to stop looking at the tourism as which is a one-trick pony where many of us are logged into that particular low-wage paid industry. What we need to do is diversify. How do we diversify? We are the only port in the nation that doesn't do any add-on value to the products that come across the docks. We get lumber from South America, but we don't have a furniture manufacturer. We get steel in great quantities, but we don't make little nuts and bolts. We are the #1 importer of rubber. Where's our tire manufacturer? We have just built a $2 billion corridor, medical corridor. You know, where's the training for our biotech? We have to diversify and put our people into the jobs that will bring about the wealth to close the gap.
First and foremost, I'd like to say that a jack of all trades is a master of none. And I hear all these people saying that they can handle everything throughout the whole spectrum when that's not even our job or what's expected of us within this role. New Orleans is full of brilliant minds, and we have to tap into them and open the think tank by changing the narrative. So when I hear lack of training, which is valid, I'll get offended because I know tons of friends from here that have bachelor's and master's degrees and are relegated to Wendy's. So I said earlier, the key here is supplier diversity. The model was created by Maynard Jackson. You don't have to take my word since they say I'm an upstart. We've seen it happen before. And we can use that model when we know that the average median income for white America, 2-parent families, $82,000. For black families, $26,000. Like this man admitted, it's nationwide. We're dealing with the symbolism now of what haunts us, the monuments and whatnot, but we can now change the narrative, right? And what we can do is we can offer relief for our youth and our citizens. We're being preyed on by the municipalities. Harsh toll we pay. We're the human price for email technology. And so I'm going to keep coming back to we must establish an equity because any institution that we provide here, like they've all admitted, are controlled by the people with the money. And yes, that is an issue of racism, Mr. Bassel, because we can't discount the suffrage of our ancestors to get us to this point. So just so happens we're all broke.
Time, Mr. Paul, that's time. Ms. Smith?
Well, first we got to start bringing people to Louisiana to do what Louisiana can do for themselves. Second thing, Judge, not to tailgate on what you said, our industry is locked up in prison. They go every day. Angola sits on 18,000 acres, and it is a manufacturer. Most of us have someone in jail, and when you go to Angola, rodeo, you see all the craft work. We have infrastructure that is already laid out where you can have manufacture, because if you manufacture your product, it's much more valuable. But instead of us loving one another, instead of us looking at the issue, we would rather close our eyes ourselves and let jealousy, envy, racism, and hatred continue to rule us. We must stop it. Take a look at what's going on in the world. We cannot continue to put people in jail based upon race and hatred. We spend millions of dollars to put men in jail, then we make them products, and then we wonder what happened. What happened is you keep letting racism rule, and you must stop. Second of all, we must put these schools back together in New Orleans public school system, because that is the system that educates children. These charter schools, they come and they go. They have teachers that don't teach our children. They've taken music out, and now most of our musicians are suffering because all the ordinance that comes from City Hall. Now, we have to take a look at what we're doing as a people, and then realize that we are our worst enemy.
We call time. Mr. Hill?
I think we all know that wealth does not accumulate overnight. Wealth is an investment. Wealth is an investment in yourself, in your community, in what you do, whatever your job may be. But we also know that jobs are not what we're looking for here. We're looking for careers. Because when you have a career, you invest in yourself. And so where does this wealth start? And it starts with our education system. Do you all know the difference between achievement and accomplishment? Achievement happens within a system. If you get an A in a class, that is quite an achievement. But the accomplishment is learning the material. Our systems aren't based that way right now. We're just trying to move people from spot to spot to spot to spot so that we can put them into a job that they don't like, that they don't understand, and then they're unhappy, and then they have to leave for one reason or another. As an entrepreneur, I want people to invest in themselves. I want to bring down how much it costs to open a business so that you can get your wealth started. But it does always go back to education, how you're educated, and how you see opportunity. Because even as adults, we can't always recognize opportunity. And sometimes even when we can recognize opportunity, we do not know how to attain it. This comes from education. It comes from learning. It comes from mentorship. We really need to start doing this with our school system. And for adults, we need to start with City Hall. Thank you.
Mr. Henry?
The economic inequality that exists in the city, my plans for addressing that are really threefold. One is we have become and we are a renter city that is not acceptable. Today, the city of New Orleans, 55% of the residents in the city of New Orleans are renters. Most healthy, growing, thriving cities today are about 66% ownership, 33% renter. We're almost reverse of what it should be. So part of what we have to do is we have to put programs in place. I can't get into the details of it, but put programs in place where people will have rent-to-own options instead of this affordable housing strategy that is in place today for the city of New Orleans, where it's just dealing with renters. But you never give this person, an individual, an opportunity to develop equity and generational wealth that they can then pass on to their individuals. That's one. Two, you'll hear me talk about it. I want to migrate 40,000 new jobs to the city of New Orleans because we have too much poverty. And that's going to be through a customized value proposition. I expect to call on 200 to Fortune 1000 CEOs. I expect an 8 to 10% success ratio, which is 16 to 20 new Fortune 1000 companies here in the city of New Orleans. Transforms our trajectory. Instead of just being a tourism and half of oil and gas industry, we now become a diversified economy and we grow like a lot of the cities in the South are. The final item is growth and small business growth. We need to help small and minority-owned businesses grow. How do you do that? One, I talked about it previously through the liaison. The mayor has to be the liaison to the business community because he has to be the person that leads the charge to help introduce minority businesses to the majority businesses that exist today. They don't believe we exist or know we exist, and they don't believe that we provide adequate services. So the mayor has to lead that charge. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move to the next question provided by the coalition. New Orleans is a city internationally renowned for its rich cultural tradition. How will you support the cultural bearers and institutions that allow these traditions to survive and to flourish? Mr. Dorrington, we will begin with you.
We would have to take a multifaceted approach. We would have to include social ideology with understanding that New Orleans is created with a lot of citizens that make their living selling cultural items, having cultural festivals, events, programs, and we have to collaborate with certain large-scale businesses or events such as the Essence and the Jazz Fest, for example. And we need to take these cultural ideas and have them have a large role in state in just events such as the Essence and Jazz Fest. New Orleans is the birthplace of jazz. So if we have a jazz fest that is directed, led, and managed by those outside of New Orleans, we will reduce the quality of production. We won't be able to give those who come from out of state an authentic quality of music and taste. And also it will help these citizens that have a stake in these large groups to be able to spend money at local businesses. It helps stimulate their economy. So I think we would have to take that route first.
Mr. Martin.
You know, this is one of the things that attracted me to New Orleans, is the history of New Orleans, and the art, the food, the culture, the people. But I think that it's doing fine right now, but you still want to be mindful of how you can sustain it. And I wouldn't treat any other organization. There are hundreds of organizations out there right now to ensure that we keep that fabric the way it is. When it comes to buildings, you have the HDLC, and if anyone has to deal with them, you know that they are going to ensure that it stays intact. And so I wouldn't do anything outside of the norm. You know, we have folks in leadership roles right now in different institutions, organizations, and or associations that's ensuring that this is done right now. And I'll continue to support that.
Mr. Brewski.
New Orleans has a certain soul to it. And the things that we see every day, we almost take them for granted. I was at Jazz in the Park a couple of years back, and 3 tourists come up to me and said, "Do you realize what you have here? We pay serious money to see whoever was on the stage at that time. And you guys get to see this daily, weekly." I said, "Well, we don't do this every day, believe me." But the history and the culture of this city need to be embraced and needs to be put in the forefront. Treme neighborhood, my neighborhood in Central City, where the second line goes through. Those are the things that we need to do. We need to talk about minimizing some of the fees for the second line. We need to think about a music council, a volunteer council. There's a plan in Nashville that I was reviewing. I really like that. There's some other ones in Seattle and Austin. But I like the one in Nashville because it's volunteers, because they want to bring the culture and the music out to the city. And that's one of the ideas that I have. And I thank God every day that I moved here 10 years ago, because I know that's going to be coming up. And I'm not from here. Yes, I chose to live here. I chose to be here. And I want to stay here. And I want to be here for all. Thank you.
The question dealt with the international city. Right now, we're not really an international city. I can tell you, I used to be the CFO for the Chamber of Commerce. We actually had a World Trade Center in which we had ambassadors from all over the world as a part of that World Trade Center. We no longer have that. We have very few ambassadors that are representing other countries as we once had. So we can give back to them. I mean, just because they're now converting the World Trade Center, the building, into a hotel, that does not mean that we cannot attract those ambassadors back to the city. Secondly, we actually, when I was CFO for the chamber, we created a program called Louisiana Tax-Free Shopping because we were trying to go after the international visitors. Now that program still exists, but you don't hear about it as much. The idea behind that program was that we were going to bring visitors into this city, and if they came here, when they got ready to leave, whatever their purchases were, they got the taxes back to them. So we're not promoting those things as we did once in our lifetime. But nevertheless, when it comes to our own culture, we're rich here. We have the type of culture here that no other city or no other country has, so people are still attracted to that. But what we have to do, and we all went to a forum dealing with culture and the music, but we have to work with those groups who are willing to preserve it, people that are working toward that. It's the Mardi Gras Indians, it's the Second Line Band, it's the music that we have that is very unique. But we have organizations that are already in place, and as your next mayor, I'm going to continue to work with those organizations to make sure that we cultivate that culture and make sure that we enhance it and make sure that we preserve it for ourselves and not let other people come into this city and take it away from us.
Mr. Cole.
First and foremost, New Orleans is my home. I love New Orleans. I've been a lot of places. I would not live anywhere else. So I'm resigned to the fact that we're going to fix this, definitely, no matter what role I play. But when you talk about culture, you have to make sure that everybody understands what culture is, and able to identify, define culture. I've had a life that I can't explain, but my first experience of sharing our culture abroad or out of New Orleans was at the Conrad Hilton. I was 5 years old. My mother scheduled for me to say the poem "Don't Quit" at the NFL MVP Awards. And at 12 years old, in 1984, I was blessed enough to be the poster boy for the Mardi Gras commercials because I was in the St. Augustine Band. And so, what I'm trying to point out to y'all is that this is ingrained in the hometown. So we have to start there. Our next leader that we consider seriously has to be from New Orleans. We need to discuss residency issues. We got Jazz Fest musicians. I was just talking to Shamar the other day. We about to have lunch. We got Jazz Fest. Local musicians get paid less than people that come from out of town. Essence took all of our vendors away. The city officials saw nothing wrong with this because it happened on their watch. We have working models that can be funded. I propose we get rid of all the 501c3 efforts, period. I would give Chief Montana $50,000. He's already, as an entity, doing enormously great things with a shoestring budget. We have working models where we want to create everything but what's homegrown to solve our own issues. So we must first be engulfed in the culture. I was just at Chief Montana's house yesterday.
Time. Ms. Smith?
Ms. Camille, would you repeat the question?
Certainly. The question. Hold on. New Orleans is a city internationally renowned for its rich culture and tradition. How will you support the cultural bearers and institutions that allow these traditions to survive and flourish?
I'm not going to support any barriers. Let's just get that perfectly clear. Second thing is, I'm noticing that these questions come out as if New Orleans have to explain New Orleans. We welcome those of them who want to come to New Orleans and live in New Orleans. But the thing is, once they get into New Orleans and they try to gumbo and they try to jambalaya, then something else got to go in and got to get fixed up so it can be this and that. If you want New Orleans, you love New Orleans, then embrace New Orleans and stop changing New Orleans. If you're not comfortable in New Orleans, we will give you a gift basket and you can go back where you come from. Because you're creating division, you're creating hatred, you're creating distrust. So, with Johnny Smith as your next mayor, we're going to ask that everyone participate in making this a beautiful city. Once again, we're going to clean up our city. We're going to revitalize it. We're going to take these schools that are not educating our children, and we're going to tell them goodbye. Because we want to be number one again. We want tourists to come here, our international people to come here. And the reason why they don't want to come here because they don't see New Orleans anymore. They see Detroit, they see Alabama, they see Mississippi, they see everything but us. And we're not going to tolerate it no more, not this administration. Because I love New Orleans. I'm from New Orleans. I'm her daughter. So anyone that comes in my mother's house and don't want to do business with her children, you're going to have to leave. Because you're not going to be welcome. Because you're not welcoming us in our own home.
In a former life, I owned a bar in the French Quarter. It was the only blues bar in the French Quarter. And I became subject to what I refer to as the music purge of 2012. Does everybody remember that? When all of a sudden the Landry administration came out of nowhere, requiring permits, fines, fees, possible imprisonment for street performers, musicians, people like me who were trying to provide a place for these people to entertain others. And I was part of a new movement. We created NACMA, the Music and Cultural Coalition in New Orleans, so that we could fight back against the administration. And we did. We made strides in the CZO. We made strides in the master plan to protect our cultural economy. But this is not the first time, and it will not be the last time. But under my administration, this will never happen. The American Sports Saloon in the French Quarter, when they were building their interior, they found an old safe. And when they opened up that safe, there was a letter. It was from the 1860s. And the reason why it's called the American Sports Saloon is because this letter was from the owner of the American Saloon. And the letter said to the mayor, "Am I going to get in trouble for having music tonight? This continually happens. But under my administration, this will never happen." Thank you.
Mr. Henry.
Our culture is a tremendous asset to our city. It's what makes us unique from every other generic city that exists in this country today. But I will also tell you I'm a business owner. I wish I had some of the talent that some of our folks do, but I don't. I play a little radio, sometimes a little stereo, and that's the extent of my musical ability. But what I do understand is that as mayor, I will have a position that is called the Chief Cultural and Community Officer because I recognize the value and the necessity of our architecture, our entertainment, our restaurants, and all of those things. Because I'm a person that understands I know what I know and know what I don't know. And so if I don't know something, what I want to do is surround myself with someone that does have the knowledge and expertise to help guide the city in this capacity. And I want someone that is competent in doing that. There are a couple of things that I imagine that we will begin with as far as assisting in that community, though. One is I think they need to organize better. I think they need to act in a more collective fashion so they can now exercise the leverage that they actually have in the city of New Orleans economically. Second of all, is just parking. I think that, one of the biggest complaints I've heard from musicians is I don't have anywhere to park. I got a gear, I got a lug. So we got to make some provisions that allow them to be able to get discounted or free parking. And then the third thing is we need to work and help them with their wage scale and their compensation scale so that they can be paid fairly. Like Mr. Cole indicated a little bit earlier, that they pay out-of-town folks more than they pay in-town folks. Well, that just ain't right. So those are the things that I know, but I know that I'll have a chief cultural officer that will spend all day long making sure that our culture is preserved and promoted to the best extent possible.
Thank you so much. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this portion of the forum. Let's give all of our candidates a round of applause. This is the the end for me. However, at this time, I am going to bring up Andrea Chen and Lex Kelso. They're going to close it out, and then we're going to have an informal Q&A with the candidates if they're able to stick around. We had questions that we were not able to get to. As you well know, we have so many issues that we need to discuss. We simply are out of time. I'm Camille Whitworth. I'm your media pro, and I hope to see you all real soon. Thank you.
I'm Lex Kelso, one of the partners at Green Coast Enterprises, and with Kathleen Astorga, who's up here at the beginning, one of the founders of the South Florida Business Coalition. I'd like to start by thanking the candidates. We know you guys have very busy schedules and going from one thing to another. Thank you for coming out and talking to us this afternoon. I'd also like to, even if she jumped out, I'd like to sort of thank Camille Whitworth for moderating this. It really shows when you have someone who's as skilled and experienced as she is doing that. I am going to spend a little bit of time and give you a plug for the South Broad Business Coalition. We are literally a coalition of businesses and nonprofits in the South Broad corridor. We have had a number of accomplishments over the years and a number of things that we still need to do. Our meetings are open to the public and we love it if for all business people in the area to attend. Next meeting is Thursday, October 19th. It'll be right here in the Rose Pavilion at 5:30. And as a special bonus, after the meeting, we're all going to adjourn to Broad Street Cider and Ale around the corner. And the people who have been here will get a happy hour on us. So we hope you all can come. So it'll be great. I'd like to introduce Andrea Chen and ask her. She's doing some fantastic work on exactly the issues that we've been talking about today.
So first, I'd like to give a big thank you to the South Broad Business Coalition and the committee members that have organized this event. Thank you for your hard work, and especially a big thank you to Olivia Seidman, who's not here, but she's the one that organized all the logistics, so thank you, Olivia. And thank you to Data News Weekly, our media sponsor and event partner. Oh, there he is, Data News Weekly. Thank you so much. Also, a proud member of the South Broad Business Coalition. And then lastly, if there are any businesses that are located in this quarter, we definitely want you to join the coalition. And we have a program, a 6-month program that Trace Allen, sitting right here, is running called the South Broad Business Initiative that's providing access to capital to help entrepreneurs grow and expand. So lastly, actually the very, very last thing is we have sandwiches in the adjacent room from Best Life Pharmacy and Restaurant. So please come and mingle, get registered to vote if you haven't already, and grab a bite.